Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of Co-Creating with AI. With me, as always, is Rasmus, and I'm Martin. And with me and us today are Oscar Beijbom, who is the CTO and founder of Nyckel. And you are in Santa Cruz, California, Oscar.
That's right. You surprised me there. I thought we were going to speak Swedish, but
No,
I'm kind of relieved we're speaking English, actually.
Yeah, yes. And so what's up in Santa Cruz?
Well, it's finally getting warm. We had a terrible winter with Californian standards. We had rain, we had rain. Just that. It's terrible. No, it just dragged on a little bit too long with the non-sunny weather. So it's getting warm again. So it's nice. Yeah.
Cool. I'm coming over to visit in 6 weeks from now.
Oh, nice.
So let's
Nice.
meet up.
For sure.
So how's it going with Nyckel?
Nyckel's going well. We started it 2 or 3 years ago. Actually, we ended up joining the Y Combinator, Accelerator program. We actually applied on a whim, and got kind of surprised that we got in. And then we weren't even sure if we were going to accept the offer, which is kind of funny because other people I talked to, they were like, "Oh, it's the best day of my life, the day I got the Y Combinator acceptance letter." I think a lot of people are 22 when they apply, and it's like a big part of their identity. We're all in our 40s, kind of jaded old men, so we're like, I don't know if we need this, but we ended up doing that, and then been growing the business ever since. We're a pretty small team. We realized the hard way that so Nyckel is a platform play, right? It's sort of, we help people build up their own machine learning applications, and it's a hard thing to sell. It's a hard thing to market a platform, because basically people have to bring their own value proposition when they come. They have to kind of click for them to say, okay, I have this problem, and if I find a platform that offers a classification or detection, I can put those two together and save X amount of dollars, right? But so far we've had amazing retention. We have 98% retention. So we still think we have a good product. The people that find us tend to really stick around and use us more. It's a big world out there, and as you both know, you're entrepreneurs. It's hard to make yourself heard and find the right people. So that's some of the things we're struggling with.
Yeah.
Can you just just for me? I mean, I obviously we chatted a little bit before and everything, but
yeah.
If you would just pitch Nyckel, just the short version, and maybe who uses it, what's the kind of what type of examples are people using Nyckel for?
Yeah. So the type of people is a founder, CEO, founder, CTO of a smaller company that basically they don't want to start building up a whole machine learning team internally. They don't want to hire machine learning experts or data scientists, but they realize they have some sort of automation need in the company. So a good example is a company called The Garden. So they have indoor plants, right? And they're smart plants. So they have cameras and there's an app associated with it, and the customers get notifications about what's going on with the plant, right? So, for example, is the plant wilting? Is it bearing fruit? Is it flowering? So it's the kind of thing where, and you can imagine these pictures look a little odd because there's cameras mounted on the frame, and it's sort of close ups and blurry and whatever. So a standard off-the-shelf AI may not realize what's going on. But with Nyckel, basically what we allow them to do is just upload a couple of examples each, start with maybe 10 each. And then just provide a label. And what we do is then train a model in a couple of seconds, 10 to 30 seconds, and deploy it to an elastic endpoint, infrastructure endpoint, and then give them an API call to call it. So it's sort of and it's industrial strength. So we have people using us at 100 million calls per month, right? So you can really hit that endpoint hard, but you bring it up very quickly. So it's sort of, we think it's the best of both worlds for people that want to small companies want to move really quickly and not worry about any of the infrastructure or machine learning minutia, if you will.
Okay, and then so so in this case, Garden very quickly get that part done and
Yeah.
can then use that labeling, so to say, and say, sending notifications to their users based on like the plant. And you don't like, so how does that work? Like, can you share anything about how that works behind the hood? Like, or under the hood, you say, right?
Yeah, sure. Under the hood, yeah. I mean, so we build. Actually, I did the AutoML system, right? So it's what we do is we take a big suite of pre-trained, deep neural networks, and we handpicked them so that they sort of span the spectrum of like most things that people will want to do with images. We also support text, but let's stick with images. And then what we do is we basically fine tune them all on their data at the same time, and then we pick the one that works the best and deploy that one.
Oh, cool. So you actually you fine tune a lot of different models, and then you evaluate which one was best for the task based on the.
And we fine tune them actually in different ways. So we fine tune each model maybe 3 to 5 different ways, because there's a lot of hyperparameters involved in fine tuning, right? So it's sort of trying the kitchen sink, but very, very quickly, and then just picking the one that works best.
Cool.
And I mean,
Awesome.
like, I think, like I said, once people find us and they get it, they're like kind of amazed how quickly it is to get up and going.
And how do you position yourself now when other models start becoming multimodal and so on? It's still like on a specialized task, you might be much better at just getting the customer up and running, I guess.
Yeah, I think that is our challenge. I think most people realize that even with a big LLM, multimodal LLM, there's a choice of whether you prompt engineer, which becomes sort of that's the quick and dirty way, or you fine tune, which is sort of the proper way. But then, I mean, OpenAI has a fine tuning API. But once you get started getting into that, you still have this sort of sometimes called data engine in the industry, where you like, well, which example should I fine tune on? How do I balance my classes? How do I pick which, once it's deployed, how do I improve it? So we have that all built into the product, right? So we help you select samples to train on. We help you manage the class balance, and then once it's deployed, we actually have a feature called invoke capture that sort of captures from the active data stream and lets you just keep fine tuning. So it's like, but to answer your question more directly, I don't know if we have a good way to articulate what I just said in like a one-liner on a homepage. We're just hoping that as the field matures, people will realize that, like I said before the camera started rolling, maybe pick the task instead of picking the model, right? Like, I need to classify images rather than I want to use, Claude XYZ for something, right?
I think that's a really interesting point. Like, just on like, imagining kind of where the field goes, because we obviously we're considering these kind of things as well, but that you immediately get really good at getting to which is the answer of which is the right model very quickly. And you've sort of generally established, if I understand it correctly, that fine-tuning, like you're always going to fine-tune a model to get the result, at least for the kind of tasks that you're optimizing for, like with classification. And you're also saying that, if I understood that, like you don't you can do that with very little data, because that's something I'm like, with images I've heard that, but like is like what are the limits to like get to good result, and how do you like evaluate that? Do you involve the customer in that, or have you actually found ways to have like evals of how good the which one is the best out of these models you fine tune?
Yeah, I mean, we use cross-validation. So, like, the first thing you do when you create a function in Nyckel is you upload some examples of what you want to do. And I always say you should, like, to me, you should do that anyway. Like, even if you use a LLM or whatever off the shelf, you want to like measure. At least you want to measure performance before you put something in production. So, say you do like 50 or 100 examples of, okay, if the email says this, I think it's like my colleague just made a demo for like outbound. We get a lot of outbound spam, right? As a B2B founder. So you made a Nyckel function that says this is like an outbound spam email. So you want to like say a label like 100 examples of both, right? And I think you need to do it anyway, because then you can at least measure how well even if you're using an LLM solution, even if you're prompt engineering, you want to see if it's working. The thing is, once you have 100 examples of each, you can use something called cross-validation. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah, maybe for the listeners. So you kind of chunk up the data, so you train on like 90% and test on the last 10, but then you and then you cycle through, so you end up basically testing on everything. So now you're basically just fine-tuning a model on 90% of that data and testing it and cycling through. And then turns out that's plenty enough to fine-tune a model. So we're fine-tuning it, and then we're measuring it on the data you just provided, right? And just strictly saying, well, whatever gives you highest accuracy.
So then you can actually also incorporate a multimodal model. You could bring in Lava or something as one of your models and fine-tune it and or just evaluate different kinds of prompts for the classification that the user needs.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So.
And you are coming from the autonomous vehicle space since before Nyckel. How is that playing into how you're making tech choices and running your company now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, so for context, the team I had when I left was like 100 people. So it was researchers, sort of data scientists, data annotation and the whole data annotation group, and an infrastructure group, right? And it was like, even with that many people, just spinning up a new thing always felt like a like a chore. Like it was sort of it felt like it was too much work to spin up like a simple thing. So that was part of the motivation with Nyckel. And also a friend of mine had a company where he needed a text classification thing, and he couldn't find. This was like a couple of years ago, and he couldn't find anything that was like remotely useful for a non-ML person to spin something up. So that's sort of why we started Nyckel. So to me, I mean, I've been doing applied ML for like 20 years. I was actually at Hövding. I created a Hövding algorithm. I was the first employee there. So I've been doing applied machine learning for like my whole career. So to me, it's just interesting to see how user-friendly can we do this? Like, what is the right abstraction, API abstraction, if you will, for like a solid machine learning platform that's truly useful for in practice.
Cool. Yeah. And have you kept track of the autonomous vehicle space since? Like, where do you see it going now? Is it accelerating or plateauing, or what's happening there at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have a lot of friends that worked on. I think I have friends in all the different companies. I mean, the reason I quit is a twofold. Like the company I started with was an MIT startup. It's called Autonomy, right? And then it got acquired. Once it got acquired again, and then finally it was like a subsidiary of Hyundai, right? And the way that company was run, I didn't think they were going to succeed in building a something specifically. But then more generally, I don't know. Like, I'm not convinced that the current state of like deep learning or AI technology is able to handle like an open world scenario. Okay, so there was always this, as the field started growing, right? Sort of the deep learning revolution kind of happened at the same time as the self-driving car space really took off, and there was always this question of like, okay, so you create a bigger model, right? A bigger neural network. You have a higher capacity of that neural network to handle different types of situations. Okay, cool. So in theory, we just make the neural networks bigger and bigger, and then we can handle more situations, right? But the problem is, on the other side, the types of situation you can end up in an open world is exponential or combinatorial, right? So you have, you can see, 100 types of pedestrians, right? You can, there's like, 50 types of weather conditions you can consider. There's light conditions, daytime, nighttime, dusk, and all of these end up is like different axes of this multidimensional grid, right? And every single combination of those you have to be able to handle. So now you end up with these huge machinery of like, first of all, like finding data that fits in all these boxes so you can even know if you can handle them, right? And then you need to train on them. And then fine, that's like an engineering problem, maybe we can handle that. But then there's the fundamental machine learning theory problem of, can the models like become big enough to handle all those corner cases without forgetting other ones? And that's where I wasn't sure. Like, I mean, I think the jury's still out, but I'm not very hopeful that the current technology really is what I would think of as an like general AI.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really interesting because all you hear, like, and I drive one myself, but like, all you hear is about the like Tesla FSD, especially the latest one that's out now in beta. I think it's 12. Haven't tried it, but like how good it is, and that they made the switch from like a more thought through, rules based, scenario based kind of AI model to like one trained, I think, on either raw images or, basically raw images. And that they switched sometime last year, and now it's getting there. But it's going to be interesting to see. Like, my assumption had just been like, given that you can do it for images, and you have all of the kind of steering kind of choices of drivers, then it would make sense that you will be able to. But I mean, you know this better, but that's been an assumption of mine almost, that that's going to be solvable in this way.
Yeah. And then don't get me wrong, I think that's definitely the right idea. Like what they did, switching to direct inputs. There's also a company called Comma.ai. Do you guys know about them? With the George Hotz is the founder. He's an amazing guy. I listen to, cling to every word he says. I think he's very, very smart guy. He's been on Lex Friedman a couple of times. I recommend. I bet your listeners would enjoy listening to him as well. But so they realized it very early on that they need to do an end-to-end. Obviously, like if anything, we've learned anything the last 10 or 15 years is that if you're doing deep learning, you want to like give the network as much freedom as possible. You don't want to get in the way with hand-engineered rules and so on, right? So I totally agree with that, and I think that's the right switch from Tesla. I think I'm making more like the long-term argument, right? Is this actually going to solve the problem completely? And of course, in the case of Tesla, there's two levels, two bars, right? The lower bar is, can I solve it better than human drivers? And I think that's very attainable because the human drivers are pretty terrible. Can I sort of perfectly model the world? I don't think so, because there's always going to be a situation that they've never seen, and I just doubt that they'll be able to generalize in those situations. Now, now it becomes more of an ethics problem of like, should we let those things drive around, because you'll have fewer accidents as a whole, right? I think that's very, very attainable, but it's different accidents, right? It's like previously the people who fell asleep on the wheel or was drunk at the wheel ended up in accidents, and now it's just any random person who happened to be near a Tesla when this out of training data, out of sample event happened.
Maybe self-driving cars should start doing what humans do, and whenever you pass a traffic accident, it should like slow down and carefully monitor what's happened here, so I can learn from it, like we humans do.
Yeah.
So when you look at the current state of AI in Bay Area and Silicon Valley, where you live, do you see like the current hype as having very strong fundamentals, or do you think that this is going to be crazy for a while and then calm down and then go back to sort of a normal pace of just like developing technology again?
Right. Yeah, I'm in the second camp there. Fundamentally, those networks have exactly the same problem that we discussed for self-driving cars, right? Where they try to be open world, they try to handle all the situations. I just don't think the technology we have can do that. Like stochastic gradient descent, these big transformer blobs. I think we're like several breakthroughs away for truly like intelligent in a true sense. So what we have now are like basically wordsmiths, like sort of, but there's no one behind the wheel, right? And they can make what seems like very coherent statements. So I think obviously there are use cases for that, right? Summarizing text maybe, or maybe chatbots, and other things. But as far as like becoming the new sort of human computer interface, a new keyboard, I don't know. Like I just think the accuracy or the like precision you need for that is really high, and I wonder. I doubt that we can get there. I don't know if you guys. I mean, maybe I'm just bad at this, but like every time I try and do something with AI, I have the same exact experience. I'm like, wow! Like the first thing you ask it to do is like, wow, this is amazing, and then you like, but actually, can you like change this and that? And then it just goes completely off the rails and gives me, and I'm like, okay, well,
Yeah,
that was.
Yeah, so no, so I think that I agree completely with the open world being unachievable at the moment, and you need very very strong processes on top of the LLMs in order to achieve even a specific use case reliably, and I think that's where we feel that it's still possible to build a lot of value by creating those strong processes where the LLMs and whatever models you want to use are building blocks, and then like the actual reliable technology is gonna come from the glue as well as the actual models.
Yeah, I think it's pretty interesting there. Like if I would divide it, it's like on one hand you have what you're doing right with Nyckel, which is kind of trying to with very high accuracy determine the label of say an image, right? Because that's actually important for the functionality of the garden app, right? If you don't have very high accuracy, not very useful. And that's kind of like, I'm not sure exactly how you do it, right? But that was what, the whole kind of ImageNet breakthrough was like, I guess, previous generation of ML like hype. Or not only hype, but like real value being built from those like research discoveries. And then now, like what it's like, it's really generative AI, right? So for most use cases, for the broader, like more open use cases that aren't like very specific, then it's like generative, it's creative. It's like creative input for a human decision maker mostly. That's where it's like really good if you think it's good, if it helps you be more creative and like get more done. But like I think getting to the agent state, like I was much more bullish on, like if you listen to this podcast, like half a year, 8 months ago, I was much bullish on being able to build reliable agents that could take have more decision making authority with the current level of models then than I am now. But I'm also like more bullish that within like current apps and within, as Martin says, good processes and like good software, it can be like a component that brings a lot of value, whether it's like a high accuracy narrow task, like I'm not sure that's all you're doing, but the example you gave like was like what I would describe as a narrow task, but you can do it with very high accuracy, or like a broader kind of set of tasks, which is what we kind of optimize for at Multiply, but you can't trust its accuracy to the same degree.
Right.
But it can be very good creative input. That's I don't know. How does that relate with you? Do you sort of like, or do you have any thoughts around this?
Probably agree with that. But I talked to a friend. He's a VP of a big health tech company. So they help like it's actually for weight loss. So they help, but they're like a glue between the person and like an ecosystem of doctors and medication and therapists and so on. And one of the things they do is apparently the doctors, when they communicate, it's very dry and short and to the point, and it's not a good customer experience, right? They want. So what they do is they take the doctor's note and run it through an LLM and make it nicer, right? And then of course, because the LLM hallucinates and you don't want to like make up a doctor's recommendation, they show it back to the doctor, right? And then the doctor can say, cool, send that instead of my note. Okay, so that sounds good, but then that's like, I mean, if you read about like old school, like 10 or 20-year-old academic work on data annotation. Like that's really a risky thing to do, right? Because if the translations is good most of the times, the doctors will just not read that rendering very carefully, and they just say, "Fine, go." And now suddenly you're like in a medical sort of recommendation process, introduced a bunch of nonsense, right? A bunch of hallucinations, which could actually be dangerous for the patient. So I don't know. I mean, yeah. So that's an example where I feel like people are just too eager to jump on this, and it creates a worse product. But I'm curious. Maybe you can share some examples of the type of guardrails you've seen working with Multiply, and how you think about setting that up.
Well, I think that when with Multiply, since we have the creative output is still handed over to a human, we feel like that is the ultimate guardrail. And of course, you can also create like LLMs. You can have this actor-critic pattern where you have one LLM doing something and then another criticizing it or giving feedback. And you could do more mechanical stuff like counting words, just to see if or like if you instruct the AI to not like be mechanical in terms of sentence length and paragraph length. Like if you just prompt a ChatGPT to write a blog post, you will get a very mechanical blog post where every sentence is equally long and every paragraph is equally long as the others. And you can just you can do very mechanical, simple things like counting the words in each paragraph and giving feedback. Like, could you make this paragraph twice as long? Like that's like, but that's the I think maybe privilege of working in the sector of Multiply, that it's not a self-driving car. It's not going to crash into other cars or people if something goes wrong. And there's going to be like a nuance of a text which is off, tone of voice or something.
Right. But I buy that, but it still feels like you have this, call it recency bias of, I mean, and maybe the use case is different, but if people say they're generating some, helping generate a blog post, and they get used to the LLM doing more or less the right thing, and they just get complacent in the review process.
Yeah.
But maybe you could put up guardrails around that then.
Yeah. No, but I think that a lot of technologies have that symptom. Like just I read yesterday an article about how 4-wheel drive cars are actually in more collisions during winter time than 2-wheel drive cars, and like 20 to 30% more, because the drivers feel safe with a 4-wheel drive car. Will just rely on the technology more.
Interesting.
And once it gets slippery for real, like that, it's up to the driver to be careful or not.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
But I think also, like, I agree with you. But I think, at least from my perspective, kind of my a little bit more philosophical view on where we are with AI and how to work with it, and also where it will go, which we try to, of course, live at Multiply, like in our product, is like it is the best way to look at it is like a coworker almost, because it's like, if I have a coworker, I'm not going to assume that they're 100% correct. I'm not going to assume that they can do my work for me. So therefore, like, what we try to do, and like, we're improving every week, right, the product, but it's like creating the good flow of working together with that coworker. So not having that coworker do everything for you, but having that coworker help you do more. And I think that's like a distinction in like, in at least where we're going, which is kind of a broader, creating a general workspace for kind of people and organizations to get, value from this new coworker. and we have like different ways like of how I think we get to like relatively high accuracy because all our data is like structured and labeled like automatically in the interface, etc. And then you refer to it kind of in the prompts and in the kind of workflows that you build. But I think that's like, at least from a philosophical point of view, like how I think about it, because I don't think we're anywhere near close where I'd allow it to do my job for me or be my boss or, any of these kind of scenarios where it has, but I don't know, assistant maybe is a good word to use. I like coworker because I think it's improving rapidly in kind of competency and kind of capability. But I get why people say it's an assistant. Like you don't let the assistant kind of maybe do your work for you, but it's gonna help you. But I don't know. That's how I look at it.
Unless your nature is chaotic good, that you thrive on chaos, that sometimes you just something unexpected happens, then maybe it's something for you to have an AI boss. GPT 3.5 boss, just to live a little.
Yeah. When you said a coworker, I'm like, I actually kind of want a coworker to do, be independent. I don't want to like double check their work, but an assistant, I buy.
Yeah, maybe that's a better word actually. Maybe I'm like aspiring coworker, intern working itself up the rank.
And I think that's sort of what people are. I think again, I want to quote George Hotz there because I think he's like really good at articulating these sort of things. He was saying, like if you talk about writing code, right? These agents can write code, and he was saying they're like at a sort of a junior software developer level or less, and so they can write a bunch of code for you, but he's like, when I write code or work with a production code base, I spend like, 20% of my time writing code and then 80% of my time like thinking about code, finding bugs and making it really robust. So the last thing I want is like some automated junior agent who just like spams the code with a bunch of lines of code that mostly work. Like,
but I think that's where people go wrong with the coding GPTs, that they don't allow the GPT to spend 80% of the time thinking of the code and 20% writing it. And that's what I mean with robust processes. That you like, we need to find new processes where we actually allow AI to be much slower, like where you don't expect them to finish in 200 milliseconds, but maybe take 2 days to write something. And that's interesting to me. Like, what can you do if you give an AI a lot bigger budget in terms of time or money, or compute?
Interesting. And have you seen that play out? Like,
I think I haven't seen that play out, because currently that the race is like straight in the other direction. Just faster is better, and we evaluate on the first try, and not on like what is the result after really careful processing. It's like, I think what you describe, the process you describe with Nyckel, is a great example of exactly that, where you automatically train a whole bunch of models, and then you fix the problems downstream by just relying on one of them in the end.
Right.
And for me, that's just a beautiful example of how to build reliable AI apps or tools.
Right. Yeah, and it's easy with classification because it's sort of there's an easy way to measure performance. Maybe when you're creating text, it's a little harder to judge, or code to judge, how to score it, and make that selection. But I really hope you're right. I hope you're right, and it intuitively makes sense.
I work with the voice now, and just like all the text, like the speech to text models, they are just crap when it comes to reliability. They hallucinate, and they are they are as far from deterministic as you could expect. Like that you run the same thing 5 times and you get 5 completely different results with exact same code, the exact same computer. Like that's
Really?
yeah, so and just but then like that becomes for me it becomes a nice challenge to take on to handle that lack of reliability downstream.
Instead of using Whisper or something like that
Yeah,
level of model.
yeah. I spent a couple of months trying everything in the market
Mm.
basically, and yeah, the Whisper is sometimes great and sometimes
Mm.
as bad as anything else. And the last model they released, Whisper V3, is uh, much more prone to hallucinating than the V2.
Yeah.
So like what I see that is that people like use V2 or fine tune
Mm.
V2.
Interesting.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
And again, I think the reason that happens is because they're trying to solve an open world AI problem, right?
yes,
And their test set or their training set didn't have enough data in that square that you are, like in the
mm,
Swedish technical,
yeah,
speech, right? So even though they've improved on their benchmark or their training data, they maybe dropped in that
yeah.
particular bin.
Even last week, I tried Google's real-time speech-to-text API, and for Swedish, it produces text that looks like a cross between Norwegian and Dutch. Like it's not even like it. Well, an attempt at writing Swedish, but it's like, and I'm just astounded that they can have models out there documenting as supporting Swedish when they clearly just don't.
Yeah, yeah.
But I think this is like interesting generally. I'm not sure what your view is on this, Oscar. Like I've heard this mixture of experts
Mm.
terminology come up more and more lately in different podcasts, people writing, talking about it, and arguing also that probably ChatGPT or like OpenAI's main offering has kind of mixture of experts architecture, which like with my understanding is kind of having this matrix, this, what do you call it, this box of knowledge or training data, and then having another one, and then directing you to the box, the training, the smaller model that can actually accomplish your task reliably. Is that like a reasonable understanding of it? And where do you think this goes, given what you just said about the open world
Mm.
problem,
Mm. Mm.
and the
Interesting.
kind of real world applications? But I haven't like properly dived into this yet. So this is kind of like a bit secondhand
Yeah, and okay, so
understanding.
that's interesting. I mean, when I hear a mixer of experts, I think of I mean, that's in machine learning, that's not a new thing, right? It's been around for a long time. And the idea is that you train using the exact same training process. You just train multiple models on the same data set, but you sample the data just by random sampling of the data, you end up with different models, right? The learning process is a little bit random. And then it so happens that when you do inference, you do the inference on all models and you do like a majority vote. And
Mm,
that's been demonstrated to always give you higher performance, right? So that's like a what people traditionally mean by with mixtures of experts. So when I heard that when it came out that GPT-4 was using a mixture of experts, to me, what I took away with that was like, okay, they are at the end of the rope. They don't know how to improve this model further because it's like the last thing you do when you want to squeeze a little bit of extra performance out of an ML system. You just because you can just throw more compute. You don't have to invent it all. You just throw eight times the compute on it, like 8 models, and you get a marginally a little bit better accuracy. So to me, that was a warning flag. Now, to
interesting.
your point, yeah, to your point, where like if each of these experts is really like a domain expert, they've sort of partitioned up the data space. I think, I think you still have the same problem because then you need to divide up the data space. And if you have a my point is like you can't beat the combinatorial output space. Like then you need a combinatorial amounts of agents that you need to train,
Hmm.
right? One, and that becomes unsustainable. And then you need like a master agent in front that can separate all the agent. And now you have introduced another place where it can go wrong. Like if that first selector step points you to the wrong expert, like you get the Chinese speaker instead of the Norwegian speaker, and now you're just completely screwed. But again, caveat, I haven't read, I think, I'm not sure exactly what people say when they talk about mixture of experts.
So what does the future hold for Nyckel?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be the machine learning API for developers, right? So when people want to spin up a new AI function, whether it's, ultimately we want to do text to text or speech to text and all these things, it becomes the obvious choice to go to production quickly. So it's a complement to, Hugging Face, where it's for people that want to build it themselves and have full control. Nyckel is the place for people that want to move quick and go to production. So we're like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. And right now, it's the challenge is more like, we think we have the right recipe. We think we like the API abstraction, if you will, but it's just the marketing challenge of like getting traction, getting enough people to use it, and it's a big job, right? It's a big job to schematize every possible, AI function type and create a really sweet experience for that function type. So
yeah,
we need a much bigger team, and we just need to figure out how to get traction and hire for that.
but I think that's an awesome vision, though, to create perhaps a Hugging Face for the non-developers or for the fast movers.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so, do we have any parting thoughts? It's been amazing to talk to you, Oscar. Looking forward to see you in Santa Cruz. I hope you'll show me some nice spots around town.
Yeah, do you surf? I see the long hair there.
Sorry that there's no correlation, unfortunately, in this case, but maybe I can learn.
Yeah.
And
okay.
But thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. It's really fun. Really fun. Really fun.
Great chatting with you.
Especially loved chatting about your views on where the hype might be hype from a very concrete kind of your AI ML research background. It was very interesting. I'll keep that will keep brewing here.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like an old man, skeptical of all this new stuff. I don't know. I go back and forth, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, thanks a lot, guys, and
thank you so much.
Up there.
Yeah. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.